An audit of ISU athletics shows new spending controls are working 1 year after a scandal sunk the previous athletics boss.
They did not find any atypical expenditures incurred by key employees or other employees during the scope period.
A follow-up next on Sound Ideas. Good evening, I'm John Norton. Also on today's show, a lawmaker from Bloomington is looking for ways to address the state's teacher shortage.
We do value teaching and education and our teachers.
An actress shows that a mammogram wasn't enough to ward off breast cancer.
That's why she has advocated for people to talk to their care doctors about getting their risk stratifications completed.
And Illinois Wesleyan's longtime jazz director brings his ensemble to WGLT for a studio concert. Those stories after a Bloomington Normal News update. This is Sound Ideas on 89.1 WGLT and WGLT.org, part of the NPR network.
Support for WGLT comes from Bloomington Normal Audiology. Here My Story continues with local patients Ralph and Carol Weisheit.
For a long time, it was considered something that, that just affects old people. I think it's going to become less of a stigma and less of something that, that's just for old people. It'll be more like glasses.
Ralph and Carol's full story can be found at bnaudiology.com.
From the campus of Illinois State University in Normal, this is WGLT's news magazine, Sound Ideas. Good evening, I'm John Norton. Illinois State University has released summaries of internal and external audits of athletic department spending. These come in the wake of questionable expenditures that led to the resignation of Athletics Director Kyle Brennan last year. WGLT's Charlie Schlenker has more.
In a presentation to the Academic Senate of the university, Internal Auditing Director Rob Blemler said the internal audit concluded a nearly $19,000 reimbursement for tickets to the Big Ten football championship in December of 2021 was a one-off. That came as part of a donor-wooing trip that included a stop at a strip club.
And then I would note that the university has different travel rules and regulations depending on the funding source, that is university funds or foundation funds.
The external audit was by a firm versed in forensic accounting. It reviewed expenses from both university and foundation funds from July of 2020 through April of 2023. The consultants analyzed transactions to compare the expenditures of key employees against all other athletic employees. That's supposed to show whether there were unusual spending patterns. They used data analytics to detect anomalies within a data set. They also searched transaction descriptions for specific keywords, including, but not limited to, entertain, tickets, donors, and stewardship. Blemler says another search looked for duplicates of transaction amounts incurred by the same employee.
They did not find any atypical expenditures incurred by key employees or other employees during the scope period outside of those identified by internal audit. The consultant's full report did identify transactions that met the analysis criteria, but these transactions were reported and deemed to be consistent with operations and not considered atypical.
Following the resignation of Kyle Brennan, reports surfaced about a previous audit that had found potential weaknesses in the department's internal controls. Blemler told senators university advancement has taken other steps to strengthen controls over entertainment and meals. Those went into place in January of this year.
There are now per-person thresholds for entertainment and meals. Expenses exceeding these limits require pre-approval by the appropriate vice president, athletic director, or president.
Specifically, entertainment expenses such as tickets exceeding $100 per person and meals over $80 per person must be pre-approved at least 72 hours prior to buying them or the event date, with a detailed business justification. If an employee has unplanned spending over those limits, they have to submit them within 72 hours of the event with a detailed explanation and justification. Senators didn't have many questions. One, from Professor Jim Pancrazio, noted there are widespread background checks of people who come to campus in a variety of roles.
Are we actually looking into the quality of the people who are going to be providing funds to this university? Because consistently we're talking about our faculty that are going to embarrass the campus by making comments on Twitter or X or whatever they call it. And are we not paying attention to what we're actually pursuing?
Senate Chair Martha Horst said the Senate last year asked the university to review how it vets potential donors. Blemler said that was outside of the scope of the audits. As a side note, Aaron Rossi was indicted on felony tax fraud charges after the donor trip and after he made a now unfulfilled pledge to support construction of an indoor practice facility. Martha Horst said the ISU Board of Trustees and the Executive Council of the Senate have reviewed the full audit report, not just the summary. ISU President Andove Tarhuli was not present at the Senate meeting and, according to an ISU spokesperson, was not available. ISU put off fee increases slated to support athletics amid the questions about its institutional culture. Then, Interim President Tarhuli named faculty member and NCAA board member Jerry Beggs as interim athletic director following the Brennan resignation as one move to bring calm to the institution.
We're happy that it's finally done and that it's out now in the public and been vetted through the Board of Trustees and through Academic Senate. We were happy that there were no other anomalies, and so I'm pleased.
Beggs expressed hope the results will restore faith in the athletics department and university processes.
There were a lot of good people there, and they didn't deserve the reputation that last spring created, and so I'm happy that we're moving on.
Beggs says the new spending guidelines and pre-approval requirements have not caused much of a shift in athletic department operations.
No, we weren't spending excessively before, other than this one particular case that brought us to the situation. So it has not changed.
She says current morale in the department is good and that people feel supported. She says the impact on donations and fundraising has been minimal.
I don't think those really ever fell off. Our donors were sad to hear the story, but many of them were much more interested in whether our football team was going to be good in the fall or how our men's and women's basketball going to do. They didn't seem to be as bothered by it as I might have guessed.
Following the upheaval, ISU finished its practice facility without the money pledged by Aaron Rossi following the Indianapolis trip. After he left ISU, Kyle Brennan returned to Utah for a job at a name, image, and likeness collective, raising money for student athletes. After a few months, he moved on to become vice president for sport commissions of the Professional Pickleball Association based in Salt Lake City. I'm Charlie Schlenker.
Tomorrow on Sound Ideas, you'll hear from a Bloomington pastor who merges his faith and fitness and is seeking to break his own national bench press record on Easter weekend. More on that on tomorrow's Sound Ideas. A state lawmaker from Bloomington is part of a new working group that's looking for ways to address the teacher shortage in Illinois. Democratic Representative Sharon Chung tells WGLT's Eric Stock Illinois State University will likely be a key stakeholder in those discussions, as it is one of the nation's top teachers' colleges.
I think that we're probably going to be asking for a lot of input from different stakeholders. I'm sure the Illinois State Board of Education will be there, maybe teachers' unions too, possibly. I don't know. I think anything is on the table, I think. We've already done things with sort of raising the teacher minimum pay. I know that there are bills right now even just being discussed this session about paid student teaching. That could be another thing that's on the table. I don't know, but I guess that's why the working group is there. We're going to try and examine all the sort of possible solutions.
Being here in the district where there is Illinois State University, what kind of feedback have you gotten from the education community, teachers in particular, and the concerns that they're hearing about why this shortage is as severe as it is?
Yeah, I think especially with Illinois State, I just said how we had the paid student teaching bill that was introduced, and we had a subject matter hearing about that a few weeks ago. And there was a large number of Illinois State University students that came and advocated for the bill. It's something to see if we value teachers at every sort of stage. It's the ones who are thinking about going into teaching, then making sure that we do support the teachers while they are teaching, and then even just examining the ideas of pension after they do retire, just to show that maybe that we do value teaching and education and our teachers at all levels of their career. But yeah, I think I haven't talked with anybody since I was named to the working group yet from Illinois State, like their education department or anything, but they do know sort of my commitment to that, and I'll be for sure reaching out to them to see if we can bring them to sort of address the working group. Maybe they can give us some more insight into why they think that it is the way it is. But I, like with a lot of other parts of the workforce. COVID did a lot, to sort of decimate the workforce. So we're just trying to see what we can do to build it back up and to strengthen it and to support it as much as possible.
Based on reporting that we have done and others have done over the last number of years with this teacher shortage, the concerns raised from educators who have stayed in the profession and those that have left is they feel underpaid, they feel underappreciated, they feel perhaps a lack of autonomy from administration, and increasing concerns about their safety. Does that square with your understanding and feedback that you have gleaned over time?
Yes, I've heard all of those sorts of all of those issues that have come up throughout the years, especially more recently, and even just knowing some teachers who have considered getting out of teaching altogether. These are definitely their concerns. So yeah, I think I'm really honored to be part of this working group, because we're probably going to be really talking to a lot of people, trying to see if we can come up with some solutions, even just ways to maybe just encourage more people to go into the teaching profession. I sponsored, there have been bills about trying to encourage students to go into different parts of education, like for special education, or to teach in underserved areas, to really provide scholarships for those students.
Is there an expectation that the legislature will be able to free up additional money for whatever recommendations may come, considering the fact that ultimately a good part of this may end up meaning additional resources for schools and educators in particular, and even if it has to come from the districts themselves, they will be looking for the state for help.
Yes, definitely. I think that especially with Governor Pritzker, we've really, invested a lot in public education. With the evidence-based funding model, we've paid into it every year. Now there's talks about trying to see what we can do to increase that, not just meet the minimum sort of payment into it. We'll try and see. It is going to be a tough budget year. I know that we're talking about it an awful lot. I think we're talking about budget more earlier this year than I remembered from last year, and just kind of shows how tough it's going to be here this year.
Recent surveys from the Illinois State Board of Education show Illinois has thousands of teaching vacancies across the state. State Representative Sharon Chung of Bloomington spoke with WGLT's Eric Stock.
Crow said back in 2019 that she wouldn't make another album. But now she's back with an album. It's called Evolution. She said it began as a conversation about artificial intelligence and what it means.
Not only for artists, but what it's going to mean for our humanity.
Tomorrow on Morning Edition from NPR News.
This is Steve Inskeep. Listen to Morning Edition weekdays from 4 to 9 a.m. on WGLT.
This is Sound Ideas on WGLT. I'm John Norton. When actress Olivia Munn was diagnosed with breast cancer and had a double mastectomy, she said she was lucky. Cancer doctors hope other women do what Munn did. She got a breast cancer risk assessment. Matilda Francois is a surgeon at the High Risk Breast Clinic at Carle Cancer Institute in Normal. In this edition of WGLT's Sound Health, Francois tells student reporter Megan Spurline Olivia Munn's risk assessment showed something that normal mammograms and even genetic testing did not.
We have basically tools on the internet that you plug in information and it spits out a calculation of your potential risk of developing breast cancer in your lifetime. And based off of those results, we are able to give recommendations to patients about how we might monitor or image them differently than we would the general population with only the average amount of risk. So what happens is that she undergoes this risk stratification, and it comes out that she is considered high risk despite having had normal mammograms in the past and normal genetics. And so her gynecologist recommends that she undergo an MRI, a breast MRI, as part of her surveillance that's recommended because of her high risk. So she undergoes this MRI, and it notes an abnormal finding. Had she never known that she was at an increased risk, she would have been continuously undergoing mammograms and would have likely advanced her disease prior to the mammogram finding it. And so that's why she has advocated for people to talk to their care doctors about getting their risk stratifications completed.
Where you work, how exactly do you go through that process, and like what different like tests and like tools do you have available?
So there are actually quite a few different risk models that are utilized in the medical community. A few are more commonly used than others. We have one that's known as the Tyrer-Cuzick model, or also known as the IBIS risk tool. Probably the one that Olivia Munn used, because it's the one that's more commonly utilized. It also takes into account and consideration family history a little bit more than some of the others. And what happens is that it's basically like an online questionnaire, and it asks you things like your age, your menstrual history, your birth history if you've ever had children, your density on your mammograms, your family history, have you ever had any previous abnormal mammograms and biopsies associated. So it puts a lot of this pieces of information, and then it spits out at the end a calculation of your risk in the next 10 years and your risk in your lifetime, so by the time that you're age 85 years old. And based off of the risk that is calculated is how we do recommendations. None of these tests are able to tell us 100% if you will get cancer, but they tell us who to monitor more aggressively.
Are these risk calculators, is this something someone could access at home because it's like online, or would you have to go into like a doctor or gynecologist to do that with like your doctor?
They are actually all readily available online for patients to risk stratify themselves. The problem is that the way that they're set up is that sometimes it can be difficult for patients to know all of the answers to the questions without the help of their doctor. I wish that they were a little easier to fill out, but just the lay person may not understand what the question is asking, if that makes sense. So some people don't know what their breast density is. It's reported on their mammogram, but the report that they receive may not list it to them what their breast density is. But their doctor would know that easily by looking at the results of their last mammogram. They may know that they have had a biopsy of their breast before, but they may not necessarily know what the diagnosis of that biopsy was. They may just know, well, it was benign. But some benign things still increase your risk of breast cancer. And if you don't know specifically the diagnosis, then you may under-risk stratify yourself at home.
The American College of Radiology now recommends getting a breast cancer risk assessment by age 25. Francois says women should get their first mammogram by age 40, but sooner if they have a relative who was diagnosed with breast cancer at a young age. Francois spoke with WGLT student reporter Megan Spurline.
Support for WGLT health coverage comes from Carle Health. You can count on Carle as your partner in healthcare. Information at carle.org.
And our final story on Sound Ideas, we're going to talk to some jazz musicians who can play anywhere. That was certainly the case Tuesday when Glenn Wilson, Jim Pugh, and Leon Lewis Nickel met Lauren Warnicki at WGLT After Hours. That's 3/5 of TromBari. That's Wilson and Pugh's long-running band making its Jazz Up Front debut tomorrow. For this preview, they squeezed a trombone, a baritone saxophone, and a full-size keyboard into one of our studios to play a few songs. And indeed, it was a squeeze.
So we'll just play real short. Yeah, do you want to do like maybe a little sound check here? Just do like one chorus. Oh. Okay, so origin story time.
Well, he plays the trom and I play the bari.
So that was it.
That was it, basically. And we looked it up. Nobody had that name, but there is an attorney in Boston named Robert TromBari. So I hope he doesn't sue us, but I think we're good in Illinois at least.
Lucky him.
Yeah. Robert TromBari. I don't know if I want to mess with that guy.
Well, why the two of you, though? There are other trombone players. There are other
There's none better, though.
Well, touche.
And likewise.
Yeah, well, we're about the same age. We're pretty old. And we like to play the music that we enjoy. And this is some great music that we get to recreate and play and make new every night. So we're very happy to be doing it.
Yeah, we're bringing it back.
Yeah.
Bringing us back.
We're bringing us back. Yeah, we're making us play new music, write new music, and have a good time doing that. So Jim's still very busy with his teaching at U of I and Steely Dan. Yeah. And I watched my brand new granddaughter. Oh, wow. That's what I've been doing. So No, but we're very excited about playing at Jazz Up Front this Friday with TromBari. And we have a great group, a book of arrangements from the 50s, really the 40s, all the way up until the present. And some of the great trombone, baritone groups in the history of jazz. There haven't been many, but there are a few. And we have some of their repertoire from the Jerry Mulligan book with Bob Brookmeyer and Pepper and Nipper. There have been a few throughout the years. There's Curtis Fuller had one with...
Oh, that's right. I forgot.
Yeah. It's a great sound, the trombone and the baritone, especially when you can play as high as Jim can play. And to play in a group together like this, you have to have the same sense of time of the music. And so we're of the same era, more or less. And Leon is
not
the youngster. Leon was 2 when we made our record.
So where do you come into this, Leon?
I don't know. I think it's just, an honor being in their presence and getting to play this music with them, bringing 2 different eras together and see how we interpret the music. They have a different interpretation, which is good. They've got the history behind it, and we've got the youthful exuberance that we bring to it.
So you mentioned, Glenn, that some of these are arrangements that were already like preordained for trombone and bari sax. But are there other tunes that you had to kind of,
quite
work around that because it's not they're traditional jazz instruments, but they're not. Correct me if I'm wrong, but they're not conventionally like front instruments. And if you have a jazz combo, it's more likely you'll see a trumpet and an alto sax or something like that.
You're right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's another reason we started the group, because we both like to solo and we like to play. And sometimes, especially in a bigger group, we're the instruments that aren't thought of as improvisers necessarily. Jim's one of the greatest trombonists in the world. What?
Yeah. In big bands, it's like, usually there'll be tenor solos and trumpet solos,
and
occasionally alto,
occasionally alto, and rhythm section.
And then the chorus comes in, and that's when you get to play.
Yeah, we get to play nothing. So that's why we in this group, so we can play everything.
Uh-huh.
And that may be actually why some of the groups that formed earlier did that too.
Yeah.
It's trying to make they have a voice and have something they want to say. And the only way to do it is sometimes you just have to go out on your own.
The TromBari Quintet plays tomorrow night at Jazz Up Front in downtown Bloomington. Jazz Up Front is a 21 and over club. Band members Glenn Wilson, Jim Pugh, and Leon Lewis-Nichol spoke with WGLT's Lauren Warnicki.
Support for arts and culture coverage on WGLT comes from PNC Financial Services. PNC is committed to supporting local arts and culture events in the communities they serve.
And that's Sound Ideas today, WGLT's news magazine, made possible in part by Bloomington Normal Audiology. I'm John Norton. Story help today from WGLT's Charlie Schlenker, Eric Stock, student reporter Megan Spurline, and Lauren Warnicki. Ryan Toohey edits Sound Ideas. Thanks for listening. This is 89.1 WGLT and WGLT.org, part of the NPR network.